up, let me just give some brief introduction. I thought we will discuss a little bit about what it takes. You saw some world-class companies coming out of India. And you should remember there's very little government money there. It's all private sector. And a lot of them don't even have a domestic market in India, but they're still doing it. So what we would like to do is talk a little bit about how do we really get the IoT ecosystem going. And I will invite my panelists. Sharad, can I have you back? Pramod, you are needed again. And can I have Anthony from GE? And Viral, where are you? Yeah, please come over. Come. We are challenged for time, so we will run it quickly. And we will take all these gentlemen are here for dinner, so we can take a lot of it offline. And we will also have a process of engaging on the IoT ecosystem. Okay, thanks. Can I have my presentation? Yeah. Okay, what I will do is, this is an unusual thing, and it was not easy. I had to get TIE and ISA, we have been cooperating for a long while. I had to get InnoFest, which is the brand under which iSpirit is running a science-based innovation. So we managed to get 3 of them on the panel, and that has been quite a big thing. So for IoT in India, I want to give you a context of where IoT in India is. And as chair of IoT Forum, we are connected to about 280 companies, 120 very active. So there's a lot of activity going. It's at the peak of the hype curve, so everyone talks about IoT. Many of them maybe just rehash of the whole thing. But I wanted to talk to you about what is needed. And in future, if you are Twitter, please look at IoT for India. There are lots of industries where there is enough money, commercial, supply chain, building, energy efficiency. There are some where there is viability is an issue. And that's true for public health. That's true for large segments of agriculture. Some are profitable. So the whole issue is to arrange for innovation and adoption where it's profitable, and then use that scale and the platforms, like Viral explained or Pramod will. If you have good architectural layering, simple APIs, other industries and other models can build on it. And that's how you get scale. And that's what we hope to achieve. I mentioned about 283 startups that are around on IoT, and a lot of them, surprisingly, and it's not a big surprise, work on the software side of it. So there are a lot of guys building IoT platforms where you put the device data and they can analyze and process it. A lot of them guys do connectivity. Most people who are not aware assume that connectivity is Wi-Fi or cellular. That's wrong. For IoT, it is typically a lot of other things, including Bluetooth. And there's a lot of innovation that will happen there. We have semiconductor services and tools. There are many maker spaces there. This slide will be available at a website I will name. So you have everywhere in India, there are about 40 different maker spaces. There are about 8 incubators. And of course, Bangalore will have the benefit of the government-funded Center of Excellence, which is being managed by NASCOM. It's not true that IoT doesn't get funded. Hardware companies get funded. And if you take examples, so we have, for example, Altix in Bangalore, Altizone, Covensys got funded. These are all in the smart factory, and they're all delivering tremendous ROI. Typically, payback period is 5 months or 6 months, and Cisco and Reliance have invested in Covensys and taking it there. You heard that GoQ got a lot of money, those who were in the agriculture panel could have seen Nimble Wireless, which has been funded by Angel Prime. Loginext, which is this is an assistance scheme that TIE ran. We had 23 companies, 16. Some of these guys are there, and they got funding, and they're now into the US. So this is a good application will always get listened to. Apart from product companies, suddenly there is a huge interest from service companies and R&D around IoT, because a lot of it is still work in motion. What we have done at TIE and ISA, quickly, we started around September. Over the last slightly more than 15 months, we have done 18 events, 1,500 participants, and 4 cities. What has been surprising, and this is not new, Sharad told me when I was starting this, I was chatting with him, he told me, and the practitioners actually prefer hands-on. Even today, We had a capacity problem. We had 620 people, and we were not organized for it. Worse was our technical sessions, people couldn't even enter the hall. So we obviously had it wrong. And this is a challenge we have to do. But we are running a lot of technical sessions, and you will see that we have, including Contiki open source and deep dives into the things. We also ran an assistance scheme, and we looked at a sample of 23 companies, not with commercial viability in mind, but to understand what stops people with ideas from building stuff, what stops idea to prototype. And we learned hard issues. We don't have a manufacturing base, we don't have do-it-yourself culture, we don't have skill sets. People obviously don't understand that manufacturing a device requires embedded engineering, requires testing, requires design for manufacturing, requires branding, requires inventory management. So the skills don't exist. The practitioner network doesn't exist. All this has to be built, but it's happening. The other large issue was around spectrum. Now, India, we have a funny national spectrum allocation. So there is a 2 megahertz band allowed for crane operators. There is some band allowed for this. It's scattered all over. And it's clearly insufficient. In the Smart City project, which is a fantastic innovation, the money that the government is going to put for Smart City is peanuts. It is going to cost a lot more. But the nice thing about Smart City projects is it's got residents engaged. And the ownership of the whole problem is now with the residents instead of our mentality of blaming the government or somebody else. In fact, surprisingly, most of the cities which are going to win in the challenge, many of the projects will get done, whether they get funded by the central government or not, because the ROI is very clear. So the spectrum needed to make it work is large. So when we first went to the necessary regulatory bodies, WPC, etc., there were a lot of old-timers, people who have lived with the SCADA world and all that, and who poo-pooed us on enough spectrum. So we did a calculation. If you take a city like Mumbai, a place like Dharavi, you need 100,000 nodes per square kilometer. Even a place like Bangalore is 40,000. All existing methods, Wi-Fi, cellular, will not work with the bandwidth we have, and we asked for a minimum of 10 megahertz and a maximum around 22. I'm very happy that the TEC has agreed and recommended 10 megahertz, and we hope forward to work. I would request you to bookmark this site, IoT for India, and you will see a lot of it there. We have a lot of activity around security, etc. There are other areas which I will not cover. And these are the Twitter handles you should use when you are talking about it. With that, I am done. I will hand over to the panel. As a penalty for exceeding time, we will keep it short and sweet. Sharat. You need a mic. Can I have a mic there? Why didn't you come in?
So we want to have a provocative discussion about what does it take to build an ecosystem. Why would India become what would it take for India to become a dominant player in this whole IoT ecosystem that is emerging? And the answers are not as simple as they may appear on the surface. And some of our panelists are in fact, all of them have a perspective on this. And I'm going to request Maria Sundaram first to share his perspective. He's got rich experience being in GE for 17 years. He's the GM of the power division, the engineering of the power division. Trichy engineer, before that with BHEL, deep domain knowledge. I would love for you to share your perspective first, and then we'll open it up for the rest of the panel. Thank you.
Thank you, Sharan. Good evening, everyone. I was just couldn't come during the full day because my daughter was not well, but I just came towards the evening and I was just thrilled. I just came in when Arvind was talking about the Aadhaar. Pramod, sorry. Okay, so something for Pramod.
His name is not there.
Okay, Pramod. Pramod was talking about Aadhaar. And I can tell you, I think just sitting here and listening to some of the presentations, Pramod, and later we had Viral, and then we have this Indus, Team Indus, another one, Logistimo. I have actually very little doubt that, in the years to come, we will definitely have a huge opportunity to stake the claim of being the IoT capital of the world. Because reason is, I'm not just being an Indian, but I think in terms of the data, I think in just the sheer volume of information which we will have, in the different sectors, right? Probably the closest competitor will be our neighbor, I think, but definitely, I think in terms of what we are trying to do here, just in this room and what we're going to hear next couple of days, I think, is immensely, I think, impressive. For me personally, I think, so I just felt this is a fantastic opportunity, and I'm very happy for GE to be associated with this in terms of really partnering with IESA and to really kind of drive this whole perspective around, what is the next big thing for IoT in India, and what is the kind of innovation we are going to really look at. So I think I will quickly, I know that we have limited time, I'll just quickly talk a little bit briefly about GE, about in this, what we're trying to do in this space, and then a couple of thoughts around India, I think from the IoT space, what we think, can really drive innovation in this space. Quickly on GE, I think as many of us, right, I think we are trying to really we have been the big iron in terms of having the infrastructure assets around the world. And coming from a power industry, I can say that, a third of world's electricity today is powered by GE's equipment. With the acquisition of Alstom, so a third of world's electricity is getting powered by GE's equipment. So just imagine the sheer size of data, the volume of data which we will have access to being in this industry. So I think what we are trying to do here, I think similar story there in the aviation space. So what we're trying to do is, how do we, I think, kind of move from being a big iron company to a big iron plus big digital company, right? So the transformation which you're seeing is a digital industrial company. And I can say that, I've been a mechanical engineer for a couple of decades in the energy space. I can't say that I don't know digital. So today, I think the expectation within GE is, as a leader, how are you going to really see it together? How are you going to see the value, customer outcome? How are you going to create customer outcomes using this combination of domain knowledge plus the digital? I think the whole IoT, the Internet of Things, we call it as industrial internet. And I saw a couple of things around, we are actually launching a platform which is going to be open, so called Predix platform, which is going to be the industrial internet platform. And we are opening it up for everybody to really host applications on that. So we are calling it in 3 dimensions. We call it as Predix for GE, I think within GE, Predix for our customers, and Predix for the world. So that I think today we have partners like Infosys, Cisco, and others who are actually partnering with us on that whole Predix platform, trying to build apps on that top of the platform. And we, in terms of solutions in India, I think we have obviously put a lot of our wind farms in India, and we are trying to really see how can we really use this whole industrial internet platform to create more better outcomes for our customers in a couple of ways. One is definitely increasing the annual energy production, which is actually the key thing for the customer. Second is our Indian regulation. I think the government is going towards a regulation where they want the wind companies, wind farm developers to predict how much they are going to feed into the grid. And they are giving them opportunities for them to change it 8 times during the day, right? And in terms of how much they can feed into the grid. So we are actually currently completed a pilot with one of our customers using the whole IoT plus the wind farm information. How can we really accurately do it? And we have been successful, I think, by far in terms of coming close to around 94% accurate, which is actually by far the industry best so far. So that is definitely on what we are trying to do on wind. I think we are doing on healthcare. Tele-ICU has been a product where we have been trying to really use the experts available in places like Delhi to really provide access to the people in the rural villages. And that's the internet platform which we are trying to do, and it has been launched already. So a couple of thoughts around India, I would say, I think the areas of innovation, in my view, I think is definitely, I use the term, I think a lot of people spoke about it. I use the term called Uberization. I think we have to really look at Uberization of agriculture, Uberization of energy, and then Uberization of, I think, access to healthcare. I think we are started already there. If I speak about what Uber did is created an affordable, accessible, at the speed at which we want, and I think at the lowest cost of service, right? I think, and that's the move all this IoT innovation is looking at, right? And just looking at what the kind of connection with Aadhaar can give, I would say these 3 areas. I think these are the 3 areas, in my view, can create a huge amount of opportunity for innovation. Thank you.
That was very good, except I would have said Olaization rather than Uberization. No, okay.
and some of us on the panel here believe this. See, we don't think you can create an Uber until you create the building blocks that led to Uber, right? And because I think it's a myth that you will see a Uber or Ola will become Uber, because Ola is really a replica, copy-paste implementation of Uber. And you know, for some of us who live here in Bangalore, even in Koramangala, where Ola is now headquartered, you know, many of us end up preferring Uber, right? And so the battle will be won by people who move first. And the ones who will move first are connected to the actual building blocks that have been built. In that context, Viral, I want to ask you a question. See, prediction relies on building a model, you know, kind of a digital twin, as GE also says. And today, those digital twins are mostly being built in MATLAB. Now, you are disrupting a franchise which is 30, 40 years old. Do you think you'll be able to do that?
There are two MATLAB guys here, so maybe if you can just raise your hand so that I know. No, just kidding. Yeah. I used to be actually a huge user of MATLAB. My PhD thesis was actually building a parallel MATLAB. And I've always been a fan of it and what Cleve Moeller, the founder of MATLAB, has done. In fact, I was his teaching assistant, and I learned a lot of my numerical computing from folks doing MATLAB before I started the journey to Julia. So I think, I don't think of it as a disruption per se. I mean, although that is what may happen in the market, and we'll be happy if that does. We actually started Julia because, we were kind of getting frustrated with the fragmentation in the software when it came to doing data science. So for example, this digital twin example, right? You would create a digital twin, maybe, you might have a CAD model. Maybe you will do the simulation in MATLAB or Simulink. Maybe the data extraction and ETL will be in, in Python, for example, or Perl. And then maybe when you want to host it, maybe when you want to put on predicts and offer it as a service, it might end up being, using Java on the server side, for example. And, this requires too much coordination across too many different teams. And, maybe for a large organization, that's possible. But for, when we started work on Julia, the same problems happen at an individual data scientist level as well. And that's why we thought, can we have one language that is fast, that is productive, that's easy to use, that can be flexible? And we had this sort of funny blog post called Why Julia, which we released in 2012. And that kind of what made Julia an overnight open source success. We got 200,000 hits in a couple of days. And that's why, so I think disruption will happen, but we try to solve something for ourselves rather than...
I had a question for Viral, and I use Julia, so I'm one of the few guys who, and I gave him a one-liner. If he uses it, I have copyright on it to describe Julia. The question I wanted to ask, what do you need to make sure universities and colleges in India start adopting Julia in a big way?
So I think you raise a very important point. While universities in the West, in the US and Europe are using Julia in a big way, universities in India are not yet. And I mean, Pramod has often told me about his daughter going to school and, they're teaching Microsoft Office. I mean, you would expect that. So, personally, I think at the level of education, we should be teaching our students, our kids, tools, not tools necessarily, but concepts, and tools that can stay with them for life, right? So open source software, open source languages, rather than a particular company's products. I think in India, university systems and syllabus are more centrally controlled. So maybe while it's tough to change it, you just have to change one place.
And I tend to believe we won't be able to replicate the US model here in India. So I think for us to expect that the public building blocks will come from our universities is a very far-fetched vision here. I think it is more likely to come from the iSpirit type efforts, HasGeek and other groups coming out who are going to build much more stuff in the open source kind of a fashion. That is what is going to happen. That will set India apart rather than expecting our universities to do that. Although we are only a stone's throw, a long stone's throw from Indian Institute of Science, it's not going to happen. Now, I promised you that Pramod has an answer to a very tricky question, which is going to be the largest IoT network here in India. So, can anybody guess what that is? No, no, but what Aadhaar is not, what part of Aadhaar? Pramod, what, yeah, you tell them the answer.
No, I think it's, we want to see larger networks. I think the number of biometric sensors, we believe currently probably 100,000 plus already on the network, multiple iris devices, fingerprint devices, attendance systems, micro ATMs. But the big one is coming, the big wave of every phone having biometric sensor or iris. We believe iris will take over because it's very low cost iris embedding onto the phone, sub $5. And every phone will have it and its accuracy is very high. So single network having number of sensors, for a while I think we'll hold it, but we want to see larger ones though.
Now, Arvind and I have had long conversations about how to make it a secure network. Now, so Arvind, you'll be happy to know that each of these sensors is actually a secure endpoint because that if it is compromised, it compromises the system. Pramod, can you very briefly describe how is it maintained as a, because this has implications for other secure endpoints that we build.
I had a lot of guys talk to me that they want to hack Aadhaar. So for all of those guys, pay a lot of attention.
First of all, we are not on the internet, so hack it. So nothing is exposed. Mothership is not exposed on the internet. But I think what we have done is really push the boundaries of biometric sensor technology, especially on the capture side. So our protection comes from preventing unauthorized devices from capturing biometric, preventing unauthorized biometrics to be replayed on the network, preventing people from having the fear that biometric is secret. It is not secret. So we keep telling people, biometric is not secret. You are leaving it every day. You're leaving it all over the place. So it's about question of using it securely, right? It's private, like mobile number, but it's not secret, like a PIN or a password. So it's completely wrong notion that biometric is actually secret. So what we have done is a couple of things. One, on the sensor side, we have created a framework called registered devices. And many of these phones which are going to come out are actually going to be registered devices that actually captures it, encrypts on the sensor. I think it's an important thing. And Nandan, when we talked to Bill Gates also that session, by the way, interestingly, Bill Gates, first thing he walked at 8 a.m. and asked me this question straight. We didn't even start the meeting. He said, no hellos, nothing. Oh, you are Aadhaar guy? Okay, I want to have a question to you. How are you protecting biometric at the sensor? So we explained this. Preventing registered devices allows encryption at the sensor, no injection, right? So that's one prevention. Second, we are implementing locking, biometric locking, which you may not have yet seen it. It'll come out. It's in beta. Every one of you can actually use your mobile devices registered to lock your biometrics. That means no one else can authenticate you because you lock it. It's very powerful, right? I wish we had it for credit cards, that you could lock. I'll give you the credit card. You can't use it because I've locked it. It's a powerful concept. So he was super thrilled that that's amazing. The third thing is actually we are notifying everyone and so on. So there are multiple layers of other security, which is not necessarily IoT sensitive, so I don't want to go down to that path. But on the IoT side, we have actually put out that spec on the public domain, and we have had discussion on the iSpirit side that we should really use that spec to expand mutual authentication of devices knowing that I'm talking to the right server, and server knowing the right device is talking to me. Maybe it's a car software masquerading as a car talking to the network. You never know. So that mutual authentication, and a lot of time hardware vendors don't think about it. So I think it's a software play, and software guys can solve it, I think.
Before you open it up, so recent weeks we've restarted a project which will probably become the largest IoT network. So we are happy to share it with you here, Pramod.
So you should be really super excited. Quite like Aadhaar for identity for people, we are going to set up identity for every vehicle, okay? It's an RFID base. There was a committee, it's approved, 3-4 years in the works. software, now it's completely API based. That means a car can be authenticated or a vehicle can be authenticated using an API on the network, and there is a prepaid instrument attached to it for paying money. So the first application of that vehicle identity authentication API and payment is the National Highway Authority, who is going to use that for drive-through. All the trucks, cars. We have experimented you have seen a couple of stretches of the National Highway they are starting to do all through the country. And most interesting thing, the real interesting thing is that now you can write an application that allows you to do congestion pricing, or when you go into 6 p.m. to MG Road, you automatically, so like Uber-like pricing, you can actually charge additional ones. And when we talk to Delhi government, they will have this green tax. They have no idea how to collect green tax. When the trucks go through Delhi and exit within 24 hours, all these are programmatically possible through an app. Odd even is a way to collect, I know. But so this is a very exciting project, identity for vehicle, all IoT perfectly fitting in, API-based, dream up apps.
Thanks, Pramod. I think the issue of security is very important, and it's very tough to do whitelisting, which is what I heard Pramod talking, but it's the recommended way. There is an advisory on IoT security, and at TIE, we will be setting up a special group for that, and it's much more difficult than you ever imagine. But that's a separate issue. We are running low behind time, but we will take a few questions. So if you could just ask the questions. And I'd request you to ask a pointed question, not make a long observation. Madan, I'll come. Somebody has the mic. Go ahead.
I would like to ask you.
Could you put your name, your back?
Sure. I'm Venu Verma Kalidindi. I'm strategy head Asia of a German IoT advisory company. I would like to know when India can get its Industry 4.0 ecosystem design and a smart city ecosystem, because that's a must.
I'm not sure I understood your question. Industry 4.0?
I want to know who in India is going to design its Industry 4.0 ecosystem, which can help Indian manufacturing companies.
I think that we had a panel in the morning, and if Venki wants to jump in, we will do. But it is being done on the back of a large need driven by defense and driven by smart cities. The manufacturers are getting, in fact, small manufacturers are also doing a lot of smart automation and all that. So it is not a grand vision being put in, but bottom up, there is a fair amount of Industry 4.0 which is happening. Venki, would you like to add anything there? I'm okay? Okay, I'm okay. Thanks. Madan?
Yeah, Madan, from your story, question for Viral. By very interesting coincidence, your name can also be pronounced as Viral. So my question for you is, what are some of the viral side effects? The same security discussion we had, how would that apply to Julia in the scenario of cars communicating to one another, but one car gets carjacked kind of thing, and then what can happen? So what are the risks, but what are the opportunities also for secure services on these kinds of networks?
So I couldn't hear very well, sorry, I think with the acoustics, but so it's about the security of IoT devices, right?
Using Julia, for example.
Using Julia, yeah. So actually in several ways. So one of the, I mean, maybe rather than giving a long-winded answer, so Julia is actually a dynamic language, but because of the way its type system is designed, it is very highly amenable to static analysis. And with static analysis tools, you can actually formally verify the program and actually tell whether there are security bugs in the program, not 100%, but to a large extent. A large class of problems can be detected through static analysis. Of course, the framework, the interactions with the operating system, all those things, will be other layers of security. The third thing is that secure by design, right? So for example, in the IoT deployments, we will probably be turning off many of the unsafe features that we have in the language for high performance computing. So access to C libraries, buffer overflows that can be carried out by passing pointers. All those things. So no straight answer. I mean, security is always a can of worms, but I think we are better placed than most others in making this happen.
I will take 2 more questions. Let's see if there are people who... All right, I think they're all tired waiting for dinner. All right, thanks a lot. I will just summarize with another observation, and thanks a lot to Sharad and iSpirit team. You have done a fabulous job. And thanks a lot to the audience for staying on and listening to us. And we did have a time management problem. But while we talk a lot about innovation, IoT is a very vast and diverse market. So I would give you an observation, and this was asked in the press interaction also. If you take smart building, there are about 20 companies doing it, and there's not much of a difference between what they're doing. But they're all excellent businesses. There is a huge market. Consumers have an appetite to pay. All of them are revenue positive. So from an investment perspective, you don't necessarily have to be unique, disruptive, etc., to be a good business and to bootstrap yourself and be in. So there is a moonshot. We have to get to the moon, but there's also a lot of houses to be made smarter. Thank you.